As I prepare to donate 2 of my bikes to the Skip Barber Motorcycle Museum, this is my goodbye video to the S1K, a 2010 BMW S1000RR, highly modified. My first sport bike was a 2000 Aprilia Malay, which was so much different than the Harleys and choppers that I was very used to. In 2010, I remember seeing an article for the new BMW S1000RR that had just released the year before. I remember thinking, how much could really change from the 2000 Aprilia to a 2010 BMW? Where to begin? The first thing on the test drive was that I realized I was doing almost 90 miles an hour in first gear on this. And it actually, I think 92 is what it would do in first. The throttle seemed so touchy that just going over bumps, you couldn't help but twist when you got jarred, and it just wanted to lunge. So since it kind of scared me a little bit, I had to have one. So I ordered it, and it had to be built, and it arrived in August of 2010 is when I picked it up. The inline 4-cylinder engine may not have had the growl that the V-twin and the Aprilia had, but one thing it definitely had is the ability to dip into turns faster. In fact, it was such a noticeable difference. I was used to really lugging the Aprilia over to make a turn. This thing, every time I'd go to turn, it felt like I was going to fall into the turn. It was just that touchy, but it never fell. It just was that much easier to tip. I'd also scoffed originally at the electronic rider aids this bike came with. I didn't have a choice. I actually tried to opt out of them, but it wasn't an option to not have them for me. However, about the first time the anti-lock brake system took control for me, and the 100-mile-an-hour wheelie I did with sunshine on the back, where it started coming up with a hard shift from first to second, and I could see the little lights blink saying I'm taking over, and it settled us down at 100 plus, smooth as silk. So I was glad to have them. Never one to leave well enough alone when it comes to vehicles. Before I even hit 30 miles on this, I'd already taken the fairings off and was doing some airbrush work to it. I called my buddy Tracer in Florida, told him what I was doing, and he said, only white trash like you would put a flame job on a brand new BMW. That's fair. But I did that. I also painted Verrückt on the tank panel, which is German for insane. I felt like that was an appropriate name for this bike. And that was just the beginning of the modifications. As this bike sits today, I'm pretty sure that the frame is about the only actual piece that is still here from the original 2010 bike as it came. One of the first modifications I did was the brakes. I felt brake fade coming down the mountains in Colorado, and it's not a good feeling to be ripping down the mountains with drop-offs and realizing your brakes are not doing what they're supposed to. So I replaced the Nissan with a good Brembo RCS and eventually a CNC race grade master cylinder. I put new full floating rotors on, and I went with monoblock calipers. It's been refitted with a 2018 engine, as well as all the electronics, which allowed me to do things like add the quick shift for both up and down, as opposed to just the upshift only that it came with in 2010. When I went to the 18 electronics, I also had the option for electronic suspension. However, instead of that, I chose to go with a set of Olin front forks and an Olin shock out back, properly sprung for my weight, and then worked with the supplier tech to get the valving all set right so it handles like a dream. I was actually going for something that would be good on the track, but also on these back hill country roads and not so stiff that it would chatter you off the side into a ditch. I also installed a larger capacity radiator. It came with an oil cooler as well. It was made for the track, so it did not include things like the fan mount. So I had to fabricate my own fan mount so that I could use the fan that came with the bike since I still rode it on the street. Purely for cosmetics, just because I love the way this looks, is I hand sanded down the tank, got rid of all the paint that came from the factory, and polished it to, you can see a near mirror finish of just the raw aluminum. I guess technically it's a little bit of weight savings, but not a lot. To make it match better, I also swapped the swing arm out for one of the silver painted ones versus the Thunder Gray that it had originally. Because a lot of the modifications were to lighten the bike, I installed a full Acra system front to back, so it includes the headers, cat delete all the way back to the long tube, a lighter weight chain and sprockets. It's also been fitted with adjustable rear sets. I also installed a lithium battery for weight savings, carbon fiber wheels, rear and front, which also reduces the rotating mass, the slotted rear brake disc for weight, and eventually the full carbon fiber race body kit from Alpha Racing. This also allowed some extra weight savings by deleting your headlights and taillight, plate holder, and installation of a short tail, which lets you use a shorter tail section and gets rid of the seat by replacing it with just a thin little piece of foam. And yes, it's as uncomfortable as it looks. But the way you see it is about, I think, roughly 40 pounds less than how it came factory. I think we showed 196 horsepower at the rear wheel. It pulls hard, it brakes hard, handles incredible. It does everything a motorcycle should. The bike has been all over and it's done a lot. When I first got it, I would just start with maybe buzzing around town. Most of my riding was out in the Texas Hill Country on the back roads where you could really open it up, and I just started getting more and more comfortable with it. 130, 140, 150, 160, and I think the highest I ever saw back there was around 180 in the dark, which you're just kind of using the force at that point. Then it must have been summer 2012. I rode it from here in San Antonio to Loveland, Colorado, which is about a 1,000-mile trip. And this bike is definitely not set up for touring, so it wasn't the most pleasant ride there and back, but getting it up in those mountains was incredible. I'd ridden and crashed, unfortunately, the original Aprilia in the Smoky Mountains, but the Rockies are bigger. You're buzzing a white line at 12,000 feet with just a skydive waiting for you. So it's a whole new level of adrenaline, but to really turn this bike loose in an environment like that, that's exactly what it's made for. I also hauled it out on a trailer a few other times over the years just to get it out in those mountains and stretch its legs like it's made to do. In 2013, I took this bike to its first Texas Mile event, which is a runway here in Texas. And they give you 1 mile on a runway to go from 0 to as fast as you can. And that first time I did 167 mile an hour with it bone stock. Did that event for about 10 years total. And then in October of 23 last year, I hit 198.4 mile an hour. And the bike was just as you see. The only difference is I also lowered it a little bit and I had some swing arm extensions to keep from staring at the clouds. In 2014, I rode this bike from San Diego Beach to Jacksonville Beach in 33 hours and 10 minutes and set the new record for fastest motorcycle ride across America. I knew that was the coolest thing I was ever going to do in life, so after that event, that inspired the book, the soundtrack, and the movie No Limits, No Regrets, about becoming basically the best in the world at what I love to do, riding this thing fast. A few years ago, I also started riding this thing on Circuit of the America on track days. I actually think the first time was for a California Superbike class, and I was new to track stuff, which is very different than street. So I've been slowly learning, but I got to the point where the last time I did it, I was hitting, I think, 51-degree lean angles. You can see that from the back tire. And I think I was able to get 177 mile an hour on the back straight before having to pin the brakes to make the turn 12 hairpin and keep from going in the gravel. With the heart failing now, I know that I'm gonna have to start leaving things behind that I enjoyed doing. So last fall, when I hit the 198.4 on this in the Texas Mile, that was my kind of 10-year retirement period. In August, I did a goodbye trip to see my sisters once more in Colorado, but I did not take any bike with me. This actually can't go on the roads anymore anyway because there's no lighting, but I could have taken the Aprilia. But the air is so thin up there that with this breathing, that just wasn't gonna happen. And then in September, I did one more Circuit of the Americas event. It was a bit dicey. I had a buddy go with me that was able to load it and unload it from the trailer. I had to do things like strip off the leather before I walked up the stairs to classroom because stairs are hard enough already. I also had to put on the leather suit, which is actually takes a lot of effort, and then sit and catch my breath for 10 minutes before going on the track. But by the end of the day, I was dragging a knee every lap again and feeling good and hitting in the 170s on that back straight. And even though I was tired and felt awful and lightheaded, and by the time we got home, I'd been here, I just basically threw everything in the garage and I was throwing up within an hour. But to get this thing out on that track one more time was well worth it. Love will make you do crazy things, I guess. I looked at a couple different motorsports museums and I thought the Skip Barber one was probably the best home for this and the chopper as well, as a kind of a package deal, just because it's specific to motorcycles. I drained the fuel by siphoning the tank, which is never fun, and then letting it run out till the last little bit is gone. Got it all washed and waxed, pulled out the lithium battery for safety to make sure it doesn't have a Tesla fire on the way. A lot of people look at vehicles as just transportation, but I've always felt such a connection with them, especially something like this. I've had it 14 years. This is literally the longest relationship of my life, any vehicle or girl for that matter. This truly is the most stable source of enjoyment I've had in my life. This motorcycle has become one of my best friends. We've been all over in our adventures, from the coast to coast ride, from the hill country in Texas to the mountains in Colorado. There's just so many good individual memories. Every adrenaline burst, from ripping down the Texas Mile to around Circuit of the Americas to taking it to a grand opening of the Moonshine Bar and doubling the speed limit on the way home. And it's not just the high points and the fun times, but the night that Sunshine passed away in hospice, which actually is 10 years this month, I rode this bike home in the cold November rain that night, just gutted. Of course, it's hard to say goodbye to something that's been such a huge part of your life for so many years, especially the reason why. But the good thing is the bike gets to live on at the museum, in the videos, the movie, the book, and so others get to share the adventures that we had together. If you haven't done so, please click the link below to subscribe to the channel, click the little bell for notifications, and live for today.